Codependent Coder with another little tip around Travis CI. So what I'm going to demonstrate today is sometimes your build process will require Travis to commit or push changes back to the source repo that it's building. And there's a couple little wrinkles with setting that up. So I thought I'd do a quick little video showing how to do that. So in my case, the way I use it, or the reason why I need this ability, is because for my Codependent Coder repo here, one of the things I do is after every build, I tag the release and then push that tag back to GitHub. And you can see those here under releases or tags. So each one of these is done by Travis. So how did I set that up? So let's walk through that. Because by default, Travis doesn't have permissions to push to your repo. You can clone it, but it can't actually push changes back. So how do we give Travis that permission? And the answer is with what's called a personal access token. So actually here, just to show you how to get to it, because GitHub seems to keep moving where you find this. But to create one, you go to settings and then under developer settings here and personal access tokens. And then you can generate a new token. You can see I already have one set up for Travis, which I'm not going to use for this video. I'm going to create a new one just to show you the process. Anyways, you click generate new token. So what this token is it's a token that grants permissions to all the repositories that you own. So it's basically like a secret, or it's like a password. So first thing you do is you give a description. I'm going to call this for the video. Why not? That seems like a good name. And then you can define which scopes this token has. And scopes are basically like permissions. So in this case, the one we'll need is the repo scope. That is, it can access commit status, full control of private repositories. So anyone who has this token can push changes to any repo that you own. There's other permissions you can add. For example, you can grant permissions to create gists, read your user information, etc., but none of those are needed for this token for what we're going to do with Travis. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Okay, so you land on this page and then you see here's your token. So I'm just going to copy that. And it's important to copy it right now because as you can see from this little blurb right here, this is the only time that this token will ever be displayed. Once you leave this page, it's gone. It's not gone. It's just there's no way to display it again after this point. What you can do is you can regenerate the token, but you can't actually see this value displayed ever again. And if I refresh this page, it'll actually disappear. So cool. So with that token, we could actually, let's do a little change here. So here's my Travis test repository. You can see it's kind of doing what I do with Codependent Coder. It's just doing a tag of the release. Sorry, a tag of whatever the build was. But there's no, I can't just do git push origin, whatever that tag was. And the reason is because Travis currently doesn't have permissions to push to the repository. I'll leave that line in there for the moment because we'll need it in a second. But so how do we give Travis those permissions? And we can use that token for that. So I'm going to kind of simulate it here on the command line. So if we add a new remote, and we say, give it a name, let's call it, I don't know, Travis, why not? And we say HTTPS, whatever that, oops, that's not what I meant to paste. I meant to paste that access token at github.com/ whatever the path to your repository is, which in this case is pzelnup Travis test. Cool. And now I have a remote that I can push to, and it'll use that access token for permissions. So if I, for example, did create a foobar tag, and then I did git push Travis foobar, that'll push that tag up to GitHub. And if I flick back to GitHub here, to my Travis test, now if I go to releases, I should see, there it is. There's that foobar tag. So it used that access token to authenticate with GitHub essentially and verify that I had permissions to make that change, to push that tag up. I'm just going to actually quickly remove that tag because it's not very useful. Oops, mistyped. Okay, so that should now be gone. There we go. Cool. Okay, so all we got to do is the same thing, right? So where was that command? I'll just copy paste it up here. And instead of pushing to origin, we push to Travis. So this name Travis, maybe I should name it something else just to make it explicit, but token remote. So the name is completely arbitrary. Does not matter what you call it. You can call it anything you want. But the idea is here down in the get push, it needs to know which URL to push to. Now, normally all you ever do is push to origin, which is the default remote that you get whenever you clone a repository. In this case, we're adding an additional remote, which actually maps to the same server. Like it's still the repository on GitHub, but instead of using your SSH key pair to authenticate, it's using this access token. Cool. Now, what's bad? If I were to commit this and push it up, what would be bad about that? So again, this value here is secret. It's a secret value. Anybody who has that token can push changes to any repo you own. So you want to protect that, i.e. you want this encrypted in some way, shape, or form. And you also want to, instead of having it like hard coded into your make file here, have it passed in as an environment variable. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to gh token. I'm going to call and create an environment variable called gh token and use that instead. So that's a little bit better because now, I don't see the actual access token itself anywhere in this file. And then as long as I define that environment variable somehow, then all is well. So how do we get that environment variable in? Well, recall what we did with Slack here with the access token is we use the Travis gem to encrypt the value and then put it in your Travis YAML. I could, so you can define environment variables in your Travis YAML with this env clause, global, and you can define specific environment variables. Like I can't remember the exact syntax for defining plain text variables. I think it's something like this. And I think that would work. And then when Travis built this project, it would look in your Travis YAML, find this environment variable called gh token. Okay, that's this value. Plug that in here into the remote and then continue and do the push. But again, your travis.yaml is still, it's in your repo, it's public. So we really haven't bought anything here by moving it into the Travis YAML file. We could define a secure environment variable here in Travis, like what we did with the Docker password. So actually, why don't we just quickly do that? And add it. So again, because it's hidden, that means it's treating that value as secret. So it won't show up in the build logs. So with that thing there, let me pull this stuff out. I think this should work. So let's give it a try. Use token for push the change up, and then flick over to Travis here. We should see a build. There it is. And there it goes. And so this should actually push a tag to the Travis test repo, assuming all is well and it worked. What did we find here? Okay, so it did create the gh token environment variable, so that's good. Push token remote. Oh, did I type the remote wrong? I probably did. Oh, no, that's what it's supposed to be. Oh, you know what? Oops. That was me getting a little too fancy with VS Code. So when I renamed this thing, I hit Command F2 to highlight all instances and then started typing. So that actually replaced the Travis at the end of the URL here. So my bad. So let's push that up. And we should get a new build. There it is. Okay, there we go. And there it is. So exited with code 0. And note that the actual token itself has been masked out with this secure value or secure string. So we don't actually see the value in the build logs. Now, if I go to here, I should see a tag. And there it is. So that was using that access token to do the push. So that worked. Success. Now, just for the sake of completeness, I mean, there's nothing wrong with defining the environment variable in your settings on your project. Totally valid. But a lot of people, they like to put these values into their Travis YAML file itself. I'm kind of indifferent on which is the proper way of doing it. Generally speaking, I tend to use the Travis UI just because I find generating these values here a bit tedious, but whatever floats your boat. Sometimes, and like in the case of, for example, the Slack one here, I think we had to define it through your Travis YAML. But anyways, let's see how do we get that same token defined in your Travis YAML such that it's encrypted. So recall for the Slack token here, we use that Travis gem to encrypt the value. And what I did then is I had a little virtual machine spun up with the Travis gem installed and all the dependencies it needs. So what I've gone actually and done now, since I'm starting to use this thing, semi-often, is I have a little gist here with a Docker file that actually just defines a Docker image that contains that gem that you can just run and do the commands you need with the Travis gem inside that Docker container. And I do that because I don't want to install Ruby and Ruby dev. I actually already have GCC and make installed, so that's not a big deal. But I just don't want to install those dependencies on my machine. So instead I do it through Docker. So if I open up a terminal here, oops, there's that file. So let's just build it. And let's call this, name really doesn't matter, but I'll call it Travis Gem. So docker build-t. So I already actually previously built it, so that's why you can see these using cache, which is why the build was so fast. If you're doing it from scratch, the first time it'll take like probably a minute or two. But once it's built, you can then run it. And I like to add this --rm command, and I'll explain why in a second. -it for interactive, and then the name of the Docker image that we just built, and then the command we want to run. Bash. So just drops me into a bash shell inside that running Docker container. And I just want to show something here. Open up a new one. Oops. Yes. You can see that this container I have running here is this guy down here. Built from Travis Gem. It was running bin bash, and it was created less than a second ago, and it's been up for a little while. So I'm just going to leave that there for the moment. Maximize this window and do all my work in here. So once I'm here, the first time you run the command, you get this message. Sure. You only get it the first time. So then what I can do is I can actually start using this command. Now, before you can do pretty much any of these options in that gem, you have to log in first. Log in. And depending on your account, the way your account is set up, you may or may not need this --pro value. And I actually like to use that same GitHub token to actually authenticate with Travis. So I'm just going to plug it in here. So this should say I'm logged in as PZLNet. There it is. So now I can actually do the encrypt an environment variable to store in my Travis YAML. And so that would be like, what did we call the environment variable? GH token. There's the value. And pipe that into the Travis encrypt command. So if I do that, oh, did I misspell it? Travis encrypt. Oh yeah, and then I have to tell it which repository to use. And then it'll spit out an encrypted value. Now, again, depending on your account setup, you may or may not need to have this --pro value. I do. And what will end up happening is if you're in the same boat as me and you need that --pro, when you put this value in your Travis YAML file, then what will happen is the environment variable will fail to be decrypted. And what you'll see in the output, the build output, is there will be an environment variable with a name that looks like garbage and no actual value. And then your GH token value is nowhere to be seen. So the push ends up failing. So anyways, whoops, let me just copy this and oops, wrong window. Plug it in there. Cool. So let me just quickly go back to Travis here. So I'm going to remove this thing from the settings in here because we don't need it in here if it's in the Travis YAML. Oh yeah, it's building the tag. But that's neither here nor there. Okay, so I think this actually might fail because I just removed the environment variable. No, it's still there. I guess because the build started before I removed it. Is that green? That is green. Now what's it building? Oh, right. So I'm going to guess if I go back here, I'm going to see a whole bunch of tags. Yeah. So what we've gone and done here is created an infinite loop. Yeah. So, okay, quick description. So in my build, I tag and push a tag up to GitHub. And then Travis sees that new tag and goes, hey, I see a new tag. I guess I need to build that. So it builds that and then tags it, pushes the tag up to GitHub. And then Travis goes, hey, there's a new tag. Oh, I need to build that. And you get the idea. It's just this endless loop of building. So what we actually want is a little bit of logic in this command to only do a build when the branch is the master branch. The same thing I did for codependent coder, in which case, and actually just to save some time, I'm just going to copy what I did there. So recall there, I just use these environment variables to determine if I'm building the master branch or if I'm doing like a build of a tag or just some arbitrary feature branch. So replace this with make push. So only do the push if the branch is master and it's not a pull request. Otherwise do make test, which means I guess I need a test target in here. And I'll just put a little stub in there just to make it work. Okay, there we go. Tag on master. So I'll push this up. And then what we should see is it should tag the release, and that tag should appear in GitHub, and everything should be good and happy. So there's the build happening. Okay, there we go. And we should see our GH token is coming from travis.yaml. And again, it's masked out with a secure identifier. Same thing here when we define the remote. and then it pushed the new tag. So if I take this tag here, I should find that on the releases page here. If I refresh, and there it is at the top. So that worked. Coolio. Now there's just one little more thing. Again, this definitely is optional, but it's worth noting. This seems kind of like a clunky step, defining a whole new remote just to be able to do a push. And it's worth noting that you could actually just do this, i.e. take that URL for the remote and plug it in place of the name of the remote. A remote name is just an alias to a URL, basically. So you could just put the URL directly in place there. And then that removes the need of actually defining the remote locally. And part of the reason I think that's a good idea is because, for example, you'll notice here, because I ran that make push locally, it created the Travis remote locally, and that displays that access token in plain text, which isn't great. Whereas this would just, it'll only use that token each time you do the push, and it won't it won't define a remote that persists. So just to prove that, I'm going to remove that Travis remote. Now, if I do a make push, oh, right, the environment variable isn't defined. GH token equals, what was my access token again? Oops, make push. Cool. So you notice that it still appears in the output. And again, that's just like, this is local, so it doesn't really matter. On the Travis build logs, that'll get masked out. But no remote defined here. And I kind of like that. I don't like having those extra side effects happen as a part of running a make command, that if they're not necessary. So I'm just going to save that, commit it. Push it up. And that should be exactly what we want. So there's the build starting up. Okay, so here's our build. What do we got? There's our GitHub token. And you can see there's no remote. It's just a git push. Again, the actual token itself is masked out and successfully pushed that tag to the remote. And that's going to go ahead and build the tag that it just created. And again, note in this case, because I put that little bit of logic in my Travis YAML, it's not re-tagging the tagged build. So if I go here, and there's that tag. And there we go. And that's everything. So hopefully this was helpful. Thanks for watching.